If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com. The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon. It's Saturday, and that means that between 3 and 4 o'clock, it's the left versus the right. I'm David Patterson, and Jake Novak is back. And this is by popular demand. People that work here, people who listen to the show, people who don't even listen to the show but heard it was good, tell me you've got to have Jake Novak back. And what better a week than this one where Mayor Mandani is trying to turn New York City into Greater Belgrade, like we're in Yugoslavia or something, with some of his issues that he's presenting to the state and to the city council. And already the city council speaker has said these proposals aren't going anywhere, which actually, Jake, doesn't surprise me. I've known her a long time, and she's, left-leaning, but someone you can talk to and someone who is understands the issues and also understands the ramifications of what Mayor Mandani is doing. So I knew you'd want to get in on this one.
Yeah, well, please God, I hope you're right. I mean, I was very much resigned to the city council rubber stamping.
Were you saying, please to God, you hope I'm right?
Yes.
Or please God, that I'm God.
Yeah, no.
And you hope I'm right.
No.
I was just wondering about that.
I know. I don't worship any human beings. That's really worked out badly for my people every time that's happened, so I'm not doing that. But please God, I hope that you're right about that, because I was really resigned to the fact that the city council would rubber stamp Mamdani's proposals, and it would be up to Albany or some act of another act. Speaking of God, another act of God to stop it. Let's hope so. What's really striking to me about all the proposals, I mean, the talking about cutting what was going to be 5,000 cop hires, talking about threatening to raise property taxes, keeping a lot of these administrative jobs for racial equality and hiring, which in the city, I think we're good on racial equality and hiring. I mean, I think that's good.
I mean, we're not only good on racial equality and hiring, but the people who've served the city are diverse. We've had 2 black mayors now, and we've had others higher up in the city council who have a great deal of following and are listened to. And there always had to be a point that addressing the fact that there wasn't much diversity in a lot of areas needed to be addressed. But I think we're at a point right now where people really are measured by their talent, their ability, and by how effective they can be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously people on the right would say it's gone too far the other way, that now there's we've replaced one favoritism from another, but I'll leave that filed on the side, because one of the things that really struck me as funny is that someone who's lived in New York for most of the last 45 years is when Mayor Mandani said, well, we're going to try to, tax the white neighborhoods. Let me just make this clear to everyone listening. There are no white neighborhoods in New York City. There's no such thing, okay? There are wealthy areas, but, unless you're going to call, that was just a strange idea. I mean, people say, well, what about Staten Island? If you have been to Staten Island lately, Staten Island has always had, first of all, a large black population, but it has a very large immigrant population now. It's not a white area. Calling that a white area is also a misnomer. So I just, to sacrifice cops in return for billions of dollars in funding to try to get more racial diversity in the city, where I think we've really checked that box, was probably one of the more outrageous things that I saw in his proposed budget.
I mean, regularly we add on to the police force. It assures us that we have a manageable force and enough people on it. And the 5,000 new hires, it's not like we are getting rid of 5,000 cops. It's that we're trying to replace the ones who go on to other careers and retire or for whatever reason aren't there. So it's not even as if this was some big law and order move. It was really a way to accommodate crime fighting around the city.
Yeah, it's look, this is something that I pound the table on a lot. I don't know why most people on the left, I don't think that includes you, but I don't know why most people on the left don't agree with this. But poverty does not cause crime. I don't know how many more rich people need to rob us for us to realize that your economic status is not what differentiates you or decides what your morality is going to be. What causes poverty is crime. Crime causes poverty. It's the other way around. So it's quite counterproductive to cut down on this fight, as you said, a fight against attrition in the police force in hopes of saving money. You think your budget deficit's bad now. Wait till you see how bad it gets when you lose the tax revenue from businesses that are crime-addled and homeowners that want to get the heck out. The crime that blew up in this city in the late 50s and early 60s took 40 years worth out of massive economic growth of the city before it was finally ended. We don't need to start that again. So if you're making the argument, we can't afford it, believe me, you can't afford to have noticeable attrition in the NYPD.
Well, Jake, you're on a roll. Let's go through some of Mamdani's other plans that have drawn your ire, and it's not just you. Yeah,
well, I think this property tax threat, there's really no way to say it, blackmail, whatever you want to say, is basically saying, and by the way, this was something that both frightened me but also interested me in that Mamdani was telling Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, raise the wealth tax on all New Yorkers, by the way, or I'm going to jack up property taxes by 9.5% in New York City. So the first thing I thought of was, once again, the jacking up of property. So many of the property owners in New York City are not wealthy Wall Street guys living in a Park Avenue duplex. These are people who, very much like the borough president of Queens mentioned, people who are owners of two-family homes who are relying on the income of rental income from that second family part of the house so that they can own their half. This is going to really hurt people in the outer boroughs, as mayors of New York have been doing for years, by the way. If you live in parts of further out in Queens, even Brooklyn, but certainly Queens and Staten Island, you know what I'm talking about. You don't get your potholes fixed. So that's one thing. But the other part of it, Governor, was that, to me, this was a tremendous opening for Bruce Blakeman and his candidacy for governor of New York State. Because now that Mamdani is threatening all New Yorkers with basically threatening Hochul and pushing her for a tax increase on everyone in New York, Blakeman can now push his "I'm going to be a stalwart against Mamdani" to the upstate voters. Before, he could only really sell that here, downstate. Now he can go to Rochester, those parts of Buffalo or Orchard Park where they're wealthy. By the way, if you've ever driven to the Bills football stadium, I recommend you do it. You'll drive through some very fancy neighborhoods. Now he can go up to those neighborhoods and say, I'm here to save you from the Mamdani effect in the rest of the state, because Kathy Hochul won't do it.
Well, you see, Jake, herein lies a decision for the governor. I would think that there would be a certain point when the governor would feel, number one, disrespected by this whole process, and number two, knows good and well that she would probably be able to shut down whatever Mayor Mandani proposes that goes to Albany. Now, a lot of people have talked about the Senate and the Assembly in Albany, how they've moved to the left, and to a certain degree they have. But these are some serious situations that affect their districts. This is not an academic conversation about something that's going on in the ether. And I think that if the governor gets out there, and by the way, about Bruce Blakeman, I agree with you. It does open the door for him. What I'm just saying is it might coincide with opening the door for her because, I thought Mamdani would go through the first budget process and kind of act like I'm just kind of socialist, that sort of thing. But he has taken probably the sourest notes of his campaign and injected them into the budget process in New York City. And I don't think it's going to go well. I will admit it piqued my curiosity when the Speaker, Julie Menon, decided that she is not going to get rolled over. And I think that the people in the city council who know her know that she's that kind of person and would want to support her. I think he might be out there on an island within a couple of months, and not Long Island.
Yeah, I'd love to see some of the polling we can trust on Mamdani. My impression is that it's not good at this point after this last couple of weeks. And, you bring up a very good point. I said this to you on our last program together. I really believe that there is a paucity of people who are actually working for their bosses right now among elected Democrats, from mayors all the way up to governors to the past president and Joe Biden. It feels like these staffs are filled with DNC operatives who don't really care about the personalities. Politics is still about personality in this country. And don't understand. And that is why, look, I hope you're right about Kathy Hochul standing up to Mamdani, but throughout her entire governorship, it seems to me like she has passed over so many easy layups to boost her poll ratings. She could have immediately, after taking the governorship, reversed Andrew Cuomo's bail reform, no cash bail thing. She had nothing to do with it. She would have had absolutely no political capital to have lost doing that.
And now, unfortunately, they're nailing it to her.
Yeah.
When in fact, and it's great when a conservative comes on here and offers the fact that she had it. All she had to do was get rid of the bail reform. Mm-hmm. She was off to a flying start if she had done that.
Yeah, where are the Democrats going to go? She could have easily, she was going to play the first female governor card. That would have worked for a lot of the progressive wing. They had no one else to really challenge her with. Letitia James was not a serious challenger to her, and some of the other people, Cynthia Nixon, and that wasn't going to happen. And so she had, and it just feels like she didn't have a staff to tell her, be your own woman, and they didn't do that. And we're seeing this all over the Democrat Party, in my opinion. We're seeing this all over the country where people could stand out simply by being reasonable. I think that there are 6 or 7 Democrats in the U.S. Senate who would boost their poll numbers exponentially if they supported the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, this voter ID proof of citizenship act. Right now, only Fetterman's doing it. And he has a ceiling on how much moderate support he's going to get, because I think he already has he has almost a monopoly on that right now. But they won't do it. And listen, let me quote the great Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize winning economist. The greatest achievements in human history have been made by people with a selfish self-interest. Don't underestimate that. And I wouldn't mind seeing some more Democrats, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I wouldn't mind seeing some more Democrats acting in their selfish self-interest. This is insane that she's not already. She should have immediately shouted him down on this threat earlier this week and said, how dare you speak to me like that? That's not how we do business in the state. Her poll numbers would have shot up 20 points overnight.
Well, now that's where we started, that I was a little surprised that she did not take that personally. And sometimes taking something personally isn't personal. You want the world to see how you're feeling about a particular situation. Now, she's still got time in this budget process. She's introduced her budget. There are a lot of things she can do to subvert the actions of the mayor. And I, totally understand if she wants to pick the time that she decides to really make this case. But I would tend to think she would want to make it as soon as possible before this outcry from the city starts to pick up some steam there. There are a number of legislators who would welcome what Mayor Mamdani's plan is.
Yeah, well, it's called Stealing Your Opponent's Issues. Everyone should read Doug Schoen's book about President Nixon, who in 1972 effectively stole the Democratic Party platform. He promised to get us out of Vietnam. He had a drug treatment program. He stole platform after platform. And Kathy Hochul this week could have stolen this opening that I just described for Bruce Blakeman, the Republican nominee for governor. I guess he's the not completely official nominee, but close enough. She could have been the anti-Mamdani. This is Blakeman's chance to win, because the problem for so many candidates who come from downstate, who come from New York, Long Island area, the New York City, Long Island area, is is getting the excitement from voters upstate. And this would be a great way for him to do this, to basically say, look, you don't have to take my word for it. This guy is a danger to you hundreds of miles away from the city, and I will be your protector in that. I don't know if he's made that statement yet, by the way. So he hasn't exactly taken the ball and run with it either, Governor. But boy, should he. And Hochul should. And I got to tell you, again, right or left, even if it's a candidate I don't support like Kathy Hochul, it pains me to see poor management. Who is managing this? I hate to see it, whether it's a sandwich shop or a candidate. She is so poorly managed that it's maddening, even though I don't want her to win.
Well, as much as she still has time to turn this around, she really does have time. The interesting part of it to me is what you've described is very common now in a lot of basically blue states where the candidates would rather make fun of Donald Trump than talk about what they think are wrong with his policies or the policies of anybody else and get out there. And as you said, politics very often is about being a little selfish. Grab the stage, get up and do something before somebody else does it. And it's amazing how it can catch on. And within a very short period of time, people who had the opposite position are fumfering and inevitably pretending that they didn't have that position. And as a Democrat, I don't understand why we have continued to allow this to happen through the Biden administration, and probably was the ruin of the Biden administration, and even the issues with the current president. It's all about trying to make him look like he's lost his mind, trying to act, accuse him of being almost sadistic at times. But there are basic decisions that he's made that could be challenged, and not in a way that makes him out to be a barbaric personality, but like it's more like, I think that the president's calling me now, so I'm not even gonna talk about him anymore. But
yeah,
but what you have laid out about the Democratic Party is something that should be taken seriously. We have a little group even here around WABC, the shunned unknown, still Democrats, trying to build some kind of a movement. If we could get 10 people in the room, we'd be really doing great right now. What do you think?
Well, what you described, let's put that into some real examples here, because what you described earlier, Democrats who think that making fun of and demonizing Donald Trump is a policy or a way to run a campaign. Well, let's give you a hard example of someone who learned that the hard way, and Scott Stringer. Now, if you live here in the New York area, you saw the Scott Stringer commercials when he was running in the mayoral primary.
Right.
And they stood out because he said in the commercial, "I'll stop this schmuck," and it was a picture of President Trump. And that was basically his entire campaign. Let me be the one who uses the most vulgar, silly, denigrating term and for President Trump, and maybe I'll win, which, of course, was a losing strategy because the voters wanted to vote for someone, those kinds of voters who really, really hate Trump personally. And that's a lot in New York, let's face it. Those kinds of voters weren't looking for a funny commercial. They were looking for the candidate who they thought would really rankle Trump the most. And Mandani was clearly that candidate. So Scott Stringer learned that the hard way twice. One, in that he had a terrible showing in the primary. And two, earlier this week, he has his feathers all in a ruffle because Mandani has appointed as his Brooklyn director in his office someone who supported the tearing down of the pictures of the Israeli hostages after October 7th. And Stringer saying, how could this be okay? And I immediately replied to him and said, you're one of the big reasons why this guy got elected. You made the mayoral election all about hating Trump. And why would any right-minded voter not look at Mamdani and think, oh, this is the guy who hates Trump the most? So, this is the world that Scott Stringer and other Democrats are threatening us with or putting us in danger of.
It's kind of interesting because I was first elected to public office in 1985, so a long time ago. I don't remember this happening during that period of time when there were elections, there were different positions that the candidates had. They would argue, they would debate, they would sometimes make it a little personal when they didn't need to. But this whole sort of situation now where it's almost as if there's too much internet, there are too many podcasts, there are too many things to watch on TV, that it has disrupted the minds, maybe not even just Democrats, but in this particular case, Democrats, because we haven't figured out a better way to beat Republican leaders than this castigating them and making them look comical, or and that hasn't worked. And sometimes you got to sit down with a group of people that and I've always been a very good friend of Scott Stringer, but you have to have this conversation like, you know what? It's not working. It's just not working. What is working is this show, The Left versus the Right, with myself, David Patterson, and we will be back in right after a commercial break. Do you think that's okay, Jake?
I think it's fair.
Beautiful.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care. Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
The Left versus the Right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on The Left versus the Right, and we are critically analyzing Mayor Mandani's budget and also his conduct and the threats that he's made. But maybe one of the biggest mistakes that was made in that budget are the huge amounts of money that are being directed to public education and the lesser and lesser number of students who would be the recipients of of those practices. And that, really means that a lot of the money that's going to education is wasted, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, or it's being... I mean, my more conservative right-wing outlook would be that this is payoffs to the unions in return for their support on Election Day. Remember, municipal unions not only vote in blocks, or at least their leadership does, but they get the day off. They get a paid day off to go and help canvass and get out the vote. Nate Silver even wrote about this 11 years ago, in a piece about how there is voter suppression of the right in big cities in primaries, because those of us who are working on a random Tuesday, usually in the summer or something like that, have no chance to defeat people who are literally being paid to go and canvass.
Unless you want to try at 8:30 at night before the polls close.
Right.
And that's, kind of an issue that was spawned out of, I think, an initial interest, just that at that point, and at that point it was rather nonpartisan. We wanted to get as many people out to the polls. This is our country. You have a voice. Use it. That kind of thing. But inevitably, when that happens too much, somebody subverts it to their own political point of view, and that's the criticism that some of the unions have taken, that their members are off the job, the students are home, and they're not voting, and it gives them a chance not only to vote, but to go around and pass out leaflets and knock on doors to get their candidates, who are generally more progressive, to win. Now, this has happened, in other areas on both sides, but because New York City is so large and the number of people who work for the city, and particularly for the Department of Education, are so vast, that it could, in a serious race, make the difference as to who is the winner.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like money laundering. We know that the percentage of donations from teacher union member to Democrat candidates is something like 98%. It's an unseemly situation, and it goes back to the whole a lot of people feel like, teachers unions have always been this way. That's not true. Teachers unions, until the shakeup in the teachers unions in New York City in the mid to late 1960s, led by Albert Shanker, were basically like a professional sharing of information organization. They weren't like these factory workers going after the man. I mean, it wasn't what they were about. Now, there was some justification for it. In the mid-1960s, teachers in New York City started to get physically threatened, mostly by parents, by the way, not by students. They were literally in harm's way, and that's what led to a more radicalized teachers union in New York, and then the other cities followed suit. That said, we're way beyond this point right now. But a lot of people say, why are the teachers unions seem to be so against the kids? There's your answer. Because the teachers unions of today were forged out of a period when the teachers were literally scared to death of the kids and their parents who were attacking them, especially in places like Brownsville, Brooklyn. This is all very well documented in a book by Vin Canato called The Ungovernable City, which I highly recommend. Talks about it in a whole chapter there about what happened there. But where we are now, though, is I think we've taken an extra step to now they are completely politicized. They're no longer self-interested, worried, sort of in attack mode out of a defensive nature. Now they're much more proactive political organizations who very often speak out on issues that have nothing to do with education. They'll talk about it all the time. And so now it really feels like this is yet another NGO, you want to call it, another entity that is getting laundered money from the taxpayers in return for votes and political donations. And it's really hard to argue against that when we have a reduced student population and higher and higher budgets every year. And New York is bad, but it's not just New York. There are some cities like Milwaukee where they literally spend more, Governor, on the health care plans for their retired teachers. And a lot of it is Viagra and plastic surgery, by the way.
I actually knew that.
Yeah, then their operating budget for the schools. So in other words, they spend more on the health care for their retired teachers than the money it takes to keep their schools open. We don't want to have that happen here in New York City, but we're probably headed in that direction.
What was the number for the plastic surgery in Milwaukee?
Well, I think that they're probably, they found that a huge number of the health care huge percentage of the health care costs for these retired teachers wasn't for things like replaced hips and cancer surgery. It was for Viagra and plastic surgery. That's it. Listen, your healthcare is your healthcare. I actually don't want to get too mean about that. But the point being, Sure, we don't want to have these people without health care coverage. They are retired teachers after all. But if you're spending more on that than the operating budget of your schools, then you're upside down.
You know, it's interesting. When I was younger, and this is when they had the, issues of the teachers union and Al Shanker and trying to make sure the teachers were protected. And then the attack on them that there weren't enough minority or black teachers and that kind of thing. It's interesting how over the years they were able to sew up those differences, but to come back with a plan that was worse than it was back when teachers of color didn't think they were getting the support from the rest of the union, that kind of thing. It pales in comparison with the way the unions have at times, not all the time, but in certain situations, had so much of an effect on the government entity and the government leader that it hurt the actual education of the students, and it didn't do anything for the people who were teaching them. In other words, they just had a strict plan and they stuck to it.
Yeah, well, I'm all about the books today, so I'll recommend another one. Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs contains a fascinating section of the book where Steve Jobs is speaking with Barack Obama early in Barack Obama's presidency. And he's telling him, look, I've got a plan to really, really help with the teaching materials and things like that for schools, but I can't do it. The teachers' unions in this country are making it impossible for anyone to help the situation. And he just said, you got to fix this problem because this isn't just about me trying to get iPads into the schools. This is about probably the most systematic detriment to American progress. I believe that the only systematic racism that really exists in this country is our public education system. We've decided that failing minority students, especially black students, is okay. As long as the unions say it's okay, I don't care. I'm sorry, to me, that is the most systematic and most dangerous racism we still have in this country. And I think for my Republican friends and my conservative friends who think, oh, well, it's not about that, Jake. It's about the fact that the family is broken down. Listen, when I worked at New York One, the story that used to make me cry and smile simultaneously the most was the story, I think it was January every year, where the parents had to line up at night in the horrible cold to try to get their kids into the charter schools. And they would wait around like they were waiting for a concert ticket or something like that. And it made me sad that they had to do that, but it also made me say, like, this is amazing. Whatever the percentages are of not great parents in that community, let's deal with these people who are willing to make this sacrifice first, and then we'll talk about your family problems, which are harder to fix. I can fix the school situation a lot faster than I can whatever the family issues are. So to me, this is the great systematic racism in this country, allowed by people of color themselves who seem to be totally okay with it, at least at the official level. And to me, this is the great shame of the country. This is worse than the Klan. Worse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's saying a lot. The president, I'm sure, did not entertain Mr. Jobs' offer. Speaking as someone who supported him, who in many ways, many of us who were supporting him came from the same type of condition, and he gets into office, and you never hear about these offers that are made to him, which is why we gave him the name No Drama Obama, because what he really wanted to do was get to the end of his 2 terms and not have any scandal before him, which he was able to do. But if you start to look at the conditions of housing, of unemployment and underemployment and poor inadequate healthcare facilities and an educational system that was failed, which is why I wasn't always in favor of the charter schools, but there certainly were charter schools that should have been held up as a standard for what the other schools should be teaching. And I got a whole lot of flack for doing that. But the point was that how many times are we going to gripe about things where it almost doesn't matter who gets elected because there isn't going to be any real response to it?
you talked about Barack Obama. I think it was Eldridge Cleaver when he was a congressman who said that if Obama had been a white man, that he would have led the African-American community to storm the doors of the White House every single day, basically. It was an interesting comment. I'm paraphrasing the quote, but you can look it up. Congressman Cleaver at the time said that because it was just outrageous that there was this kind of, that lack of stewardship. I mean, I think the American people would have been okay with that kind of stewardship. I mean, some people would have said favoritism there, but I think in that case, I think the American people would have been okay with it.
Didn't he have a different first name, the congressman?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the original Eldridge. I'm sorry. I'm not. Obviously, it wasn't him. It was another Cleaver, but I think it was his brother or one of his relatives.
Right.
You're absolutely right. We don't have by the way, for those of you, the two of us are not sitting in front of computer screens. We don't have Google in front of us. We're just sitting here talking. So that's what happens when you get a certain age. But yes, it was Congressman Cleaver. You can look that up, and he said that they would have marched on the White House every day if that had been a white president at that time. So, especially because remember, the first administration of the Obama years was the Great Recession, and of course, obviously, black people suffered under that more than white people.
Right.
And they were and so again, I think that what we got instead was virtue signaling speeches about Trayvon Martin. Things about Professor Gates getting harassed by a cop, although it turned out, that story was that we didn't need. What we needed was a president to say what I just said, which is just that there's a systematic racism in the public school system in this country. We're going to try to fix it. There's a housing issue. That I think the American people, including a lot of conservatives, would have been okay with. Instead, we got, in my opinion, virtue signaling emptiness. The president's comments about the Trayvon Martin incident helped no one. The president's comments about what happened with Professor Gates outside his house in Cambridge helped no one. And it was just very, very, angry sort of agita type stuff. There was no policy connected to it. There was no change connected to it, and just made people angry.
I think if there had been more efforts on the part of the president or anyone else who was in office at that particular time to use the office to smooth over a lot of areas and institutions that weren't addressed up to that time, he could have then gotten away with it when he made a comment about Trayvon Martin or something like that. But when you don't have anything that you're talking about regarding the citizens who might not have voted for you, or the citizens who did are now deeply disappointed, he never, in my opinion, made that turn. And, when you're in politics, maybe you didn't start out thinking that way, but you might have to think that way now because your popularity rating is going down. But to make that turn and try to start embracing more people of different views and different ends of the actual political spectrum, and you would probably what I'm sort of saying is it wasn't that what he did was wrong. It was that what he did not take into account that everybody's hearing it.
So it was Emmanuel Cleaver. Thank you for fact checking me on that.
Oh, beautiful.
Governor. So now we got it in. He's still a congressman. He's 81 years old.
Wow.
He's young at 81. Just kidding. Yeah. But, I'll throw something else in here, which I think probably might raise people's hackles a little bit, but as well, the third, I think, major racial issue that Barack Obama spoke out on, I don't think it was necessarily bad that he did this. This was after the Dylan Roof, the guy who went and shot all those people at the black church in South Carolina. And you remember President Obama gave a very soaring speech at the mass funeral for the victims. I don't think there's anything wrong with him having done that at all. My point is, in those three instances that I mentioned, speaking out about Trayvon Martin, speaking out about Professor Gates and that incident, and speaking out about what happened in South Carolina, to me, these were all, I wouldn't say layups, but there was nothing to advance us with any of these things. We all know that going into a church and shooting a bunch of unarmed people at a Bible study, black or white, is horrifically evil.
A heinous crime.
Yeah,
right.
We know that's evil. We know that whatever happened with Trayvon Martin and Zimmerman, that was probably, obviously a big snafu of some kind, and horrible that it ended up that way. We know that what happened with the police officer in Cambridge and Professor Gates was also the result of a misunderstanding. I don't think that they were going to have some huge race riot over any of those two things, one way or the other.
Well, first of all, they couldn't have a riot because they wouldn't have gotten into his neighborhood.
Right. So I just think that, the opportunity for him to have advanced the situation that the black community in this country was dealing with some forward-thinking changes of policy were absolutely missed. And to me, I'm not a black person, but to me, that's what a shame. The greatest thing you can say is, well, I was the first black man to be elected. Who cares? That's you. What about your community? What about the rest? And I don't think he brought up the people in that way.
Well, we'll be back with the stunning conclusion of this left versus the right here on Saturday. And the way the two of us have informed each other over the first two segments, I just didn't know that Jake was black. But we'll be right back right after these messages.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
TaxAct knows every small business owner has different tax filing needs. With TaxAct, you can file yourself with the help of an expert, or TaxAct can do it all for you. You're the boss, the head honcho, the top banana. And TaxAct is like your loyal, trusty tax aide, ready to pounce on any tax needs you might have. TaxAct is dying to pounce on some small business tax needs. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
The Left versus the Right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
As we wind down the Left versus the Right show here on Saturday with a relatively new comer to WABC, who was on earlier this morning at 5 a.m., and here he is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to help me do this show.
You can't kill me, folks. You just can't.
So, Jake, tell us a little about you yourself, how you got to WABC, what you did before that, and, I knew I'd been seeing you around here a little more than usual. I didn't know if you were, working as, on the cleanup staff or something. So tell us the whole story.
Well, most of my career, I've been a TV news executive producer for 32 years. I ran and created Stuart Varney's show on Fox. I did not create, but I ran Larry Kudlow's show on CNBC for a number of years.
Wow.
I was always an executive producer, but I was also the senior editorial columnist at places, especially at CNBC, and writing about politics, but economics on a macro level. I wasn't giving you investment advice. So I did that for many years, and everywhere I worked, people said, you should be in front of the camera or in front of the mic yourself. And I always felt like, well, I've got my editorials. That's enough of my voice. But I finally decided to do it about a little bit more than a year ago, and so I had some on-air material finally to show folks, and they liked it here at WABC. And as you can tell, I'm a New Yorker through and through, and a New York historian and many things like that. So this is a great platform for me, and I'm really excited. So I'm hosting the 5 to 6 a.m. show on Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings, doing a lot of other content. There's going to be expanded content that I'll be doing as well, but for now, that's my main focus here, and hopefully doing more in the coming weeks and months.
Well, that's certainly enough to keep you busy. By the way, just I wrote an article about Netflix and how they are running over all the other companies in the same business, how they are becoming almost a monopoly of and in itself, and how the Inspector General's office has now opened up a probe to make sure that they are not taking actions to eliminate the competitors in the market. And did you know anything about that?
Well, absolutely. Again, to talk about history here for a little bit, I hope that some of the listeners out there are old enough to remember that the Hollywood studios didn't used to be, they were legally barred from owning cinemas. They couldn't be the distributors of and the exhibitors of their own content.
They were just performance venues.
Right. They couldn't allow that. Same thing with, by the way, until relatively recently, the same thing was true about TV networks. The TV networks could not produce literally their own material. They had to buy it from another studio. That's why you had things like Desilu Studios or Warner Brothers material going on Fox. That's the way it went. So, Governor, there are at least a dozen blatant, I think, detrimental monopolies in this country right now. And yes, I'm mostly a libertarian. And yes, I'm mostly a conservative pro-business guy. But that's the whole point. Monopolies are bad for business. Ask some of these companies that take it on the chin because they are a monopoly, because everything that good happens is good for them, and then everything bad happens. I think the number one monopoly in this country, before we get to the Netflixes of this world, are hospitals. A hospital consolidation in this country is a life and death issue, which has scared the heck out of me for a long time. We can do an entire program on that. Second, I think basically there's one publisher in this world right now, and it's Google. If you are an English language content maker and you're not on Google and you're not prominently shown there in the searches, you might as well not exist. This is a blatant monopolistic power that Google has that needs to be investigated on and on down the line. But Netflix is just another example. The quick way that technology has been able to create these new monopolies, Netflix being one of them, is clear. I mean, Netflix was basically the leader, is still the leader in streaming. Streaming is a more crowded space now. Netflix doesn't have a monopoly there, but they're still the leader. And for them to become this incredible content creator and the leading streaming provider is exactly what they tried to stop years ago with the movie houses and the television networks. This is just so obvious to me. And of course, Amazon should be broken up too. To me, these companies need to be broken up yesterday.
Well, I am impressed. I just read a little bit about this morning, and just sitting here listening to you, I thought, with all of his work in television, radio, online, and in executive and even administrative positions, that you would know the answer to that. Now I can rest in peace for the rest of the afternoon.
Well, it's a tough situation. I want to see competition. And again, to me, I mean, fine, it's great. Let's talk about all the places and all the industries that need to have better competition. To me, of course, it starts and ends with the hospitals. I've been writing for well over 12 years about the dangers of hospital consolidation all over this country. It is making us sicker and poorer. And to me, it should be a tremendous priority. If they could break up AT&T back in the 80s, and by the way, another book to suggest James B. Stewart's book called The Partners.
Third book, Jake.
Yeah, I know, it's called The Prosecutor. This is the shortest one, though. I've suggested.
You're not being paid to come on.
No, I'm not. I'm not. What an idiot I am. I should really start selling. For those of you who can't see, I also have a bald head. I should really have a tattoo on my head and sell that space for advertising. But James B. Stewart's book, The Prosecutors, one of the chapters goes into the heavy lifting that went into the breakup of AT&T. I'm sorry, if they could do that for the phone company, can you please do it for the life and death provider of hospital care in this country? I mean, honestly. And again, this is very Teddy Roosevelt, pro-business Republican of me. For those of you who think that I'm not Elizabeth Warren. I'm not here to get the corporations. And by the way, can I just say one last thing? When corporations are broken up, when monopolies are broken up, the shareholders make money. So why do they stop? Why do they resist being broken up? It's not because it's not going to make them rich, because it will make them rich. It's because it takes their power away. I don't care about your political power, buddy. I care about the economic vitality of this country. So here's my parting gift to you. I'm going to make you billions of dollars, but you're just not going to be able to have that seat at the table to tell my political leaders what to do all the time. Is that a deal? Can we have that deal?
The preceding does not represent the thoughts of WABC, its sponsors, or its owner. Mr. James was speaking clearly for himself.
Just so you know, my name's Jake, and the governor's gotten it right plenty of times, and I'm not offended. But for those of you who should know, James is the Anglican version of the name Jacob.
Oh, really?
Yes, which is why Jameson. Was that Scotch? I'm not a big drinker, as you can tell. But Jameson is really it's Jacob. James is the Anglified version of the name Jacob. So you're actually not wrong. My name is Jacob Jake, and James. If I had been born in Britain, maybe that would be my name.
And if Mayor Mandani were born in Britain, maybe he'd still be there and we wouldn't have all these problems.
And going back to what we were talking in the first segment about these people who promoted themselves personally. And there was nobody who did that more than Ed Koch. He promoted himself as mayor much more than his predecessors ever did. I mean, even Jimmy Walker was more about the city and the lifestyle of the city than himself.
No, he was a real promoter of himself. And by the way, when he was mayor of the city, my father, Basil Paterson, was deputy mayor for labor relations. So we'd go to a lot of these things with him, and he I guess, sometimes when you have a disability or something like that, you can become, a pawn for someone else. So when I would come to these things, he would have me stand next to him. He'd put his arm around me. And I wasn't going to run to get out of the camera.
Well, and by the way, that reminds me of another thing for those of you who are listening nationally. The huge difference between Bill and Hillary Clinton in the way that they dealt with the public and in public situations. That famous picture of Hillary Clinton during the 2016 campaign where they're taking a break on her campaign bus to go to a Chipotle, and she's behind the biggest dark glasses they could find for her so she could stay incognito. And I thought to myself, if she were married to anyone else, she would have an excuse. Because if that were Bill, he would have been behind the counter taking selfies with all the workers.
Exactly.
And listen, sometimes he was a little too friendly with the voters, if you know what I mean. But still, he was friendly with the voters. Bill Clinton, I think did like the voters. I don't know about that with Hillary Clinton. I don't think she did like them. And you can fake that to a certain degree, but it's difficult to do. Mayor Koch was such an incredible personality, and he came after, and he stood out more because he came after two mayors who really were, I think, flops of personality. Now, Abe Beame, who was the predecessor, had no personality at all. I don't think he was a bad mayor necessarily, but there wasn't much there. And John Lindsay, who everyone thought was this urbane, sophisticated guy, he wasn't that great of a personality either, frankly. On the national stage, when he briefly entertained a 1972 presidential run, he was a tremendous flop. Who is this guy? There was no interest in the man. And Ed Koch, love him or hate him, was all personality all the time. And he came after actually three mayors who really, Mayor Wagner before Lindsay, also not real big personalities. And Mayor Koch was all of that.
After he left office and he lost in 1989, I used to run into him a lot of places. And that led to a couple of lunches I had with him. And when we'd go to lunch, it was as if I was his coat on the other side of the table. He'd get up and talk to people, bring them over, and then he would say, "You have to meet Senator David Patterson, a state senator, and he's a great guy, blah, 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 blah." But he really, I think if we were rating them in terms of their connection with the public, and I think that's the most important thing was his connection. The public didn't always disagree with him. People who couldn't stand some of the things he stood for or even how he lived his life would love to come over and shake his hand.
Yeah. Well, Governor, I have an alter ego. You didn't know this.
I didn't know this.
I have an alter ego. My alter ego is Jake Novak, unemployable political consultant. Why am I an unemployable political consultant? Because I give good advice. And apparently the only way you can be employed as a political consultant in America is to give bad, detrimental advice. So here's my political advice for anyone running for office in New York City, because I think it's still true. Schmooze or lose.
Yes.
You either you either enjoy talking to people, you either enjoy the gift of gab, you either enjoy parrying with the news media. I mean, ever since Rudy Giuliani left office, we haven't had we have daily news conferences, but they're not like they used to be, where anyone could ask a question. I mean, we have Dominic Carter here at WABC. I mean, he used to spar with Giuliani and his spokespeople all the time.
Yeah.
That would never happen now.
WLIB.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have that we didn't have that with Bloomberg. We didn't have that with de Blasio. We're not having that with Mamdani. I mean, Mamdani was asked last week, this is already a little bit more than a week ago, about how he's supporting the guy who tried to knife the cops instead of the cops themselves. And all during the question that's asked, you have two of his aides saying, "No, that's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about." That is not the way you are mayor of New York City. I'm sorry. You any question to an accredited journalist is fair game. And the fact that it's not these days is what a shame. What a shame.
I was envious of how Koch and Giuliani would take the media on, that kind of thing. And I thought that I would be that person when I became governor. But you know why I wasn't? Because I was in Albany, and nobody cares what you do in Albany. You could throw a brick through the window of the court that's right next door to the Capitol, and people would say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was one of those things. My father, for example, was a professor at a number of city universities for many years, and he was also a clergyman. He was a rabbi, but then he got a full, endowed, big-time fancy professorship back at the University of Virginia, and he started teaching there. And I remember asking my dad, how was your first year? Wasn't it amazing to be at one of these prestigious universities with much more difficult admissions criteria? And he said, you know what, Jake? I really wish we had some more smart-ass New Yorkers in my class like I had in New York, because they made it exciting to teach. These kids at University of Virginia can't praise me enough. They're all squeaky clean. Yes, Actually, at University of Virginia, everyone's Mr. They don't say Professor. Yes, Mr. Novak. Yes, and he had students when he was teaching at Baruch or at CUNY or at CCNY who were saying, "Hey, what are you talking about?" That's New York to me. And to have a mayor who's insulated from questions in the news media is sacrilegious. It's so wrong.
And he is Jake, don't call me James, Novak. I'm David Patterson. This is The Left versus the Right. And you out there can now turn off your radios and call up your friends and tell them how much you love the show. We'll be back next week. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.